This podcast is sponsored by Community Bridges Incorporated. CBI is a premier nonprofit, fully integrated healthcare provider of substance abuse and behavioral health programs right here in Arizona. They offer prevention, education, and treatment services using cutting-edge, nationally recognized, evidence-based models. CBI believes in maintaining the dignity of human life and knows recovery is possible. The staff of over 1,600 employees celebrate, believe, and inspire others daily, as over 75% of the team members are in recovery themselves. Contact CBI at scheduling@cbridges.com or visit their website, communitybridgesaz.org. Hey everyone, it's Brandon Lee, host of the podcast Escaping Rock Bottom. I got a great guest on with me today. His name is Jeremy. He works in recovery right here in the Valley. Going to share his experience, strength, and hope, what happened to him in his early childhood, where he's at today, and how he's helping so many people here in the Valley get sober through an incredible program over at CBI, Community Bridges. Jeremy, man, thanks for being here.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me, Brandon.
So I ask everybody this right off the top. Jeremy, take me back to where you were born and raised.
Yeah, so I was born in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin, so absolutely a cheesehead, but I was there for a very short period, so I don't recall too much of the Wisconsin era, but I moved to Phoenix, Arizona when I was 3 years old.
When you were 3. Okay, correct. So yeah. Well, we're going to call you a Valley native.
Yeah, absolutely.
3 years old, you're here in the Valley, you're definitely a native.
Yeah.
Okay, then my next question always goes, when did you first start experimenting? What happened? What age were you?
Very early on. I was about 11 or 12 years old when I started experimenting, and my experimenting was very short-lived. So it went from marijuana maybe a couple of times, maybe a little bit of booze, and then quickly into the more illicit and harder substances such as cocaine and meth.
What age were you?
11, 12 first time. First time I went to treatment, I was 13 years old.
You went to treatment at 13?
Yes.
What I have never even heard of something like that. Now I've heard of like 18, 19 years old, kids going in. 13, you went to treatment. What'd your parents do?
So they actually tricked me. They convinced me that we were going to go somewhere just, to meet with a counselor or evaluation or whatever the case is. And we ended up going to Banner here in Scottsdale. And I remember, at that time, it was almost something that I was proud of, right? So I went to this evaluation, and the counselor was talking to me like, I used cocaine a bunch of times. I did this, I did that. And then I got done with the counselor, and I walked outside. And one of the directors at the time, or program director, came over, and he started talking to me. And he said, "Hey, why don't you just go in and talk with your parents?" I'm like, "No, if my parents bring me a cigarette, I'll consider going inside and talking to them and telling them that this is not what I want to do," because they were recommending residential treatment. I'm like, "I don't need residential treatment." So I remember I went inside, or Tom brought me out a cigarette for my father. I went back inside and I said, "Mom, Dad, this is something I'm not doing." And so I turned back around and they had locked the doors. So the little entrance doors that slide open went from not sliding. So I remember very vividly, we went out to the courtyard area and I was sitting there and I was just a mess. I mean, I had been up for days, I would run away from home. I would go out, use as much as I can, obviously worry the hell out of my parents. And then I would come back after, nobody would want to be around me or the drugs were gone or whatever the case was, And typically I'd been on the street for a night or something. It's cold or it's hot. I'd been up for a couple of days. I'm so young. I'm hallucinating. It was just, a very challenging time. So I'm like, I need to get home. And I would end up coming through the doggy door or somehow, sneaking into my house. And I remember, so we did that. We, went to Banner and we went to the courtyard. And I'm 12 years old, 13 years old, and I'm telling my parents that they have two options, right? Option one is I'm going to scale that fence, run away. You don't know when you'll see me, right? At that time, my parents didn't know much about how to deal with somebody in active addiction, right? So they're just like, that enabling piece, like we just want our kid to get better. And so I said, either I'm going to scale this wall and run, or if you guys give me a night, I'll willingly come in tomorrow. And I remember we went home. This was before they really had cell phones. I think the Nokia maybe just came out. Starting to date me. I'm still young, but starting to
I had a
date me.
pager, so.
Yeah, I had a pager as well. And so I took the house phone, and I remember I went on the side of the house because I was going to try to call somebody to score some more drugs or do something.
Right.
And I ended up falling asleep, and then I woke up to the police. So my parents had called for a police escort.
I just got to ask you, where does a 12 and 13-year-old get hardcore drugs?
Yeah. And that's a great question, Brandon. And so let's take one step back, right? So I'm a twin. So I have a twin sister. Through elementary school, I was different than others, right? My sister was very popular. All the kids liked her. Everybody liked her. I was kind of more that social outcast. So I was the kid that would go, to the little tetherball thing, and other kids would be playing, and I'd go in to join them, and then they would all leave.
Yeah.
So then I'm by myself spinning the tetherball. So really, I had this sense of needing to fit in somewhere.
For sure.
Right? I also have an older brother. He's 3 years older, and he had started to get into the experimental phase, and kind of had some friends that were up to no good. So it really became a component of latching on to them as well as some of the other neighborhood kids. And, I grew up in a middle-class, well-to-do family, and a lot of the times, I'm going to the bowling alley, they give me $40 or whatever the case is, right? So really at that point, it became, I think, about the money. And, I'm 12, 13, hanging out with kids 15, 16. Some of them are older than 18, but they're definitely a little bit more advanced in that stage when, I would say when you're looking statistically speaking, the majority of the people start to experiment. And so that's really how it all came to. My brother had a childhood friend who sold drugs in high school. And after I'd started meeting some of the neighborhood kids and started meeting some people, I had convinced him that, hey, if you, hook me up with a pager, give me some smaller denominations so that I can give people change. And if you give me cocaine and ecstasy, I can sell it for you. So then I became the kid with the drugs, right? So now everybody wants to hang out with me. Now that sense of belonging is there. It's fulfilled, right?
Yeah.
This is my crew. This is my crew. And then quickly that altered, right? Because, it was the cocaine, the ecstasy, the speed on occasion, and it was kind of, that combination of substances, and, quickly spiraled. I mean, again, running away, staying up, being up for days. So that was the first treatment. So I did the treatment there. It was a 28-day program, and I think I ended up getting loaded shortly thereafter. I mean, it was minimal time.
This is insane because I've just never met somebody at such a young age. Get into drugs at 12. You beat me. I was at 15. And then you became a drug dealer. But I totally get that sense of belonging and sense of wanting to just be part of, because I remember for me as a young child, I would always get bullied. I mean, the name of my book is Mascara Boy. I used to get called Makeup Boy because it does kind of look like I'm always wearing eyeliner. My eyelashes are super thick. Well, as a child, being bullied on the school bus and people saying, oh, why are you wearing girls' makeup, mascara boy, makeup boy, all that stuff. And then knowing that at around 12, 13 years old when I was in junior high school, I knew I was gay. But I was also a pretty good athlete. And so it was like, how can I be a really good athlete and how can I be gay at the same time? This is going back into the early 90s. Where being gay was not accepted. It's not the way it is now back then. And so I felt so much shame. I felt so much guilt. And so the moment that I had the chance to have cocaine at age 15 in Laguna Beach with my friends.
It was great.
Oh, it was amazing because I took that line of cocaine. All the bullying went away. I felt like Superman. I felt great and I felt wanted. I also, too, felt part of. And what I want people to understand, especially parents with kids.
Yeah.
And you kind of see that your child may be the victim of bullying, or you can sense, parents can always sense where their child may not be fitting into certain social groups. Yeah. And really pay attention to them, because eventually they're going to want to feel part of. Yeah. They're going to want to be part of that quote unquote cool group. And that too was for me. It's like I wanted to be part of that group because A, they were part of my soccer team, but then I would want to be out with them on the weekends, going to the movies and having house parties. But you can only be there if you're doing drugs and
Correct.
you're drinking booze.
Correct. Yeah.
So, okay, so let's fast forward a bit here because I do want to pick your brain about a ton of things that are currently going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
What did that rock bottom for you? So you went to treatment at 13. Did you gain anything at that time in treatment that you always kind of held on to?
So,
was
Brandon,
there a seed planted, or were you just too young?
So that's a great question, Brandon. And I think this is something that's also important for a lot of people to know, right? Because I think a lot of parents get defeated after they send their kids to treatment, and then a week later they end up relapsing, a month later, whatever the case is, right? What I will tell you is specific to that time in treatment, there was nothing specifically that I currently remember, like, oh, yeah, a light bulb went off, and I learned that during that time in treatment, right? I went through treatment several times in several different places, several different capacities, several different durations. What I will tell you is that when I did hit the bottom and I was finally ready to do the deal, all of the tools and skills that I had learned through all of the therapy, all of the counseling, all of the treatment, all of those various aspects is what really allowed me to do the deal and do it, relatively quickly when I was finally ready. So I learned so much from every single experience, every single time I went through treatment. And so it was kind of like one of those things where I say, I have a little toolbox in the back of my brain that I needed in order to do this deal. And they were putting all the tools in there every time I went to treatment, right? So maybe I didn't have all the tools. Maybe I had the hammer and the nail, but I was still missing the belt, and I had to have a lot of a lot of nails, and to finish the project. So it was every time I went to treatment.
And that's where I was kind of going with that question too, because some people will be like, dude, who sends a child to treatment at 13?
Yeah.
Or I've even questioned people who get sober at 19 or 20. I'm like, don't you think you're too young? Like, how the hell can you have experimented so much that you're already hitting your rock bottom?
Yeah.
That I've changed, though. I've really changed my thinking around that, because I believe that no matter if you've been to treatment or rehab, call it treatment.
Yeah.
If you've been to treatment maybe 4 times or 5 times and people around are getting frustrated, they're like, why don't they get it? Like, why don't they get it? How many times do you need to go to treatment in order for to fucking get it? And when I tell people, I'm like, no, they're actually learning something each and every time they go.
Yeah.
And it's like a piece to a puzzle. No recovery for each person is the same. It
None.
all looks different. Yeah. And guess what? That is absolutely okay.
Yeah.
I think one of the things sometimes we do is we get caught up in comparing recovery programs within each other, within the sobriety life.
Correct.
Right? We're like, well, so-and-so didn't go to treatment. Why do I need to go to treatment?
Right.
Okay. I need to tell everybody I never did.
Yeah.
I, Brandon Lee, never went to treatment.
Right.
However, I wish I did.
Right.
Because all I did was go to AA meetings, right? That's all I did for the first 3 years. Looking back with the amount of time I have in recovery now, the worst decision I ever made in my life was to not at the immediate, instead of just going to meetings, the immediate foundation I should have done was go to treatment.
Right.
To lay a proper foundation. Because whether you've been to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I've met people who've done 17 or 18 treatment programs. Each time, as you said, it's another piece to the puzzle. And one day, I promise you, if you never give up, those pieces will come together.
They will.
And you will see a puzzle creating a life of a beautiful life you never thought possible. So like that message right there is to the message to the families that are listening to this podcast. And maybe they have a child who's gone to 3 or 4 and they want to give up.
Absolutely.
You don't give up, so as long as they continue to try.
Correct.
As long as they're willing to commit to go back and to try, they're getting another seed planted, and there will be some growth.
Correct.
They're getting another piece to that puzzle that could eventually create that picture that every parent wants for their child. A job, a home, a lovely life, kids, perhaps a family. So I think that that's so important.
Yeah. And I think something else, and Brandon, I completely agree with you 100%, and I think that there's something else that is very important, and something that I frequently say to individuals who maybe don't understand, right? Because a lot of the times it is, they've been to treatment so many times. Why won't they get it? Why can't they just stop? Why won't you just stop? I mean, I've had a lot of people ask me that same exact question, right? So I go back to this. Usually it's around the 3rd or 4th grade. I think almost everybody does it, right? When you're in class and they're like, hey, take out a piece of paper and tell us where you see yourself at 10 years old, at 15 years old, at 20, right?
Where did you see yourself?
Right. I think I might have put a chef or something. You know, most people do firefighter, police officer, whatever.
I was going to run for president.
Yeah, exactly,
Clearly,
exactly.
That's changed.
Right? And nowhere ever have I to date heard, and nor do I think I ever will, hear any third or fourth grader write on a piece of paper that they want to end up using, intravenous drugs, or end up in hospitals, or end up in prison. No one ever, right?
No one.
That's one piece. Number two, every single time not every single time, most of the time, and especially during my later teenage years, that I went to treatment or went to my parents to ask for help, everything I said at that time, I meant it with every fiber of my being. When I looked at my mom and I said, "Mom, I'm done. I'm over this. I'm going to do the right thing. I don't want to use anymore." That was with 100% certainty within my mind at that time, right? And that's the thing about this disease, and those things shift. But for all the parents out there that are wondering why friends, family, loved ones don't get it, look. A lot of the times, not all the time, right? I mean, because you get in a place when you're in active use and there's manipulation and some of those other things. But, a lot of the times for me, a lot of manipulation. Yes, a lot, not a little, right?
I always tell people active addicts at their worst. We are liars, cheaters, thieves, and master manipulators.
Right? So it becomes very difficult to kind of, sift through that and determine what's real and what's not. But I will say that most of the times when I did go into treatment, the things that I did say is what I meant at that time. Yeah. And it wasn't until, obviously things change. But a lot of the times I never wanted to go back out and use, and it was just kind of what ended up happening at the end.
So when you finally got sober, what did that rock bottom look like?
So the rock bottom looked like homeless, walking on the street, on probation, facing incarceration. Nobody would talk to me. And I called my mom, and I'm a mama's boy, so I've always, been very close with her.
There's probably a lot of enabling in there too, if you're a mama's boy.
Tons. Right.
So I see moms, and I sometimes see moms, and they're like, this is my son, and like these boys would be like, I'm a mama's boy, and then I see drugs involved, and then I look at mom, and I'm like,
you're enabling.
There's so much enabling going on here, you don't even know.
Yeah. And my mom and I laugh about it now all the time, And that was the other piece, and not that I want to derail from what we're currently talking about, but in my childhood as well, I mean, they were binge drinkers, they were alcoholics, and workaholics. So,
kind of mirroring that behavior.
So not only the not fitting in, but them and not having that attention and love and nurturing from the parents because they were, either working or intoxicated.
Rock bottom.
Yeah, rock bottom. So I called my mom, and she said, "Do me a favor and don't ever call me and your sister again."
No, wow. That's good, though.
And that was really, that was one piece of the larger picture that was the rock bottom, right? By this time, I had done this deal, however many countless times. I had periods of sobriety in which I was able to accomplish a lot. So I knew that there was a greater life, and it was just kind of that vicious cycle. And so I called my mom. She said, "Don't ever call us again." And I ended up violating my probation or something, and I ended up getting incarcerated probably a couple of days thereafter.
I love what your mom said, because that is the kind of boundary that I try to get parents to understand when dealing with a drug addict child, is that it is the hardest bond to break, parent to child. Because naturally, animalistic behavior, our instincts are animalistic.
Yep.
And a parent, just like a mama cub, is going to take care of her cubs no matter what. Okay, no matter what. It is that same kind of bond between a parent and child, especially mother and child.
Right.
Because a mother will say, no. I will do anything and everything for my child. And what we try to tell them is, I know, but you're actually sending your child to their grave faster. The best thing you can do at this point is tell them You are not allowed to call. You are not allowed to live under my roof.
Right.
You can go live on the streets.
Yep.
Because what we're essentially doing, I know a lot of people are like, God, that's really cold-hearted.
Yeah.
Or the mom will be like, I can't do that to my child. No, but you have to, because you're actually going to save their life, because you're forcing them to hit that rock bottom. They have to lose everything, some
Correct.
people.
Yep.
Like even, jail's not enough, or losing your job's not enough, or losing your car, or losing this, losing a relationship, losing your kids. You have to sometimes lose everything. And the addict will manipulate that parent bond because they know there's that bond there.
Yep.
So I love what your mom did. And it did make you hit your rock bottom.
It did. And all the other times, I mean, enabling is huge, and it really is. And I tell, families and other things the same thing, right? It is the toughest decision you will ever make, right? But it is the best decision you ever make.
Right.
It's also going to be the most frightening because ultimately you are letting go, right? And hoping.
Hoping. You're saying, hey, like, listen, I can't do this. You've got to do this on your own. Hoping the fact that then they look at you and be like, I hope he gets it. No parent ever wants their child to suffer or die.
Correct. And so that's all you can do is hold on to that hope. And actually that's something, that my mom and I have talked about over the years, and I've done like other things or, newspaper articles or other interviews. And, I typically call my mom always before. And, so like, what's one thing that I should share with the world? Like, what's one thing that was
important?
What
does she say?
Never give up hope.
Never give up hope.
Never give up hope.
I love that. I'm the same way.
Yeah.
Because once you lose hope, you lose everything.
You do. You
have to have reality.
Yeah.
I always say you always combine reality, but I love that message because never give up hope. Because it's truly like, if I give up hope, why am I here? What's the purpose of living if I have nothing to hope for? And a parent with an addict child should also never lose hope, because a parent's job to bring a child into this world, when they choose to do that, is to protect that child and make sure that child is successful.
Right.
And you don't want to lose up hope on that. You lose hope on your child, then the child will lose hope, but at the same time live in reality.
Right.
And part of that reality is making tough choices. Like, you can still be hopeful and create a boundary. And I think that's really important, because I think a lot of parents are like, how can I have so much hope, but then you're telling me to cut my kid off?
Right.
Like, that doesn't sound very hopeful.
Yeah. But it is.
It is.
And that's ultimately what has to happen. Just to reiterate kind of what you said, they have to hit their bottom. And really is all you're doing is prolonging the inevitable.
Right.
And, you're potentially assisting in their death, right? Because the way that overdoses are happening at such an alarming rate today, by enabling somebody to continue to use because they haven't hit their bottom, there's that many more chances for them to overdose, die, commit some type of crime that's going to end up in a lifelong sentence or something like that. So.
Okay, so let's get into a couple topics. We just, we were just mentioning that overdose are up by more than like 150% year to year during the pandemic. I think all of us in the healthcare industry who speak about mental health on a daily basis, we work in mental health. I knew right away when I read that news that night that stay-at-home orders went into effect, and I saw people bitching about, I can't get my hair cut,
right,
or I can't go to the gym,
right.
Like, my heart sank, because what I really knew was there was going to be so much isolation.
Yep.
And in recovery, what is the one thing we tell new addicts to not do?
Isolate.
Right? The opposite of addiction is connection, yet during a pandemic, we're telling people to isolate.
Correct.
That's why there's so much death. That's why there's so much overdose. And that's why there's also a lot of relapse. So you have relapse part of your story.
Yes.
Well, clearly, if you've been to treatment how many times, right?
Yeah, right.
You've had it. What are your thoughts about relapse?
So look, I mean, it's an interesting topic that comes up a lot, right?
Yeah.
And some people will say, well, relapse is a part of recovery, or something that you said early on is treatment and recovery looks different for everyone,
right?
And nothing's the same. So some people may never relapse, right? Some people may relapse a bunch, right? My take on the relapse is It is very common, right? So to the best of your ability, don't let that defeat and or define the I've failed, I've done it, I've lost it, right?
I hate those words.
Right.
Ugh.
Yes, it happened, right? And this is a disease and it does some crazy shit that you don't anticipate, right? So if a relapse does occur, pick yourself right back up, and move forward. The other thing I know about relapse and when you look at the disease, right, is it progresses, right?
Yeah.
Even at a stagnant state, it progresses. So each one of my relapses were shorter and shorter as a result. My relapse after I got out of treatment when I was 13, it was, extended. I don't think I got back into treatment for probably another, 12, 15, maybe even 18 months. My last relapse, I lasted about 2.5 weeks.
Yeah.
So they did
the time
get
is getting shorter
and shorter.
Right. And what I tell people is that means the program's working.
Right.
It means you're getting the message, because the shorter window of time that you're out relapsing is actually, I look at it so differently from a lot of people. I look at it as like, okay, that's great.
That's great.
The shorter amount of time that you're out there, the quicker you are to realize how much you don't want that life and how much you like the life you were building when you were sober.
Correct. And you're using all the tools that you've learned from all the treatment centers,
Yes.
right? That didn't work, right? But ultimately they did work, because you have that knowledge,
Right.
because you have that understanding, because you have that perception. It's like, there's a different way.
Right.
There's a different way. There's a better way, and a lot of the times you have the tools to kind of look at some of those things and face them head on.
And every time I get the chance to say this, and I want people to understand, is that for the first 8 years of my recovery, I did 5 meetings a week at AA. So I would go to meetings for, that's a lot of meetings, 5 meetings a week for 8 years. That's a lot.
Yeah.
I eventually pulled away from the AA model as far. I'm so recovery based. I do so many different aspects. I now have my own menu of what works for me in treatment and recovery.
Me too.
And my own design for a living. So what I tell people is that AA is not the only way to get sober.
Correct.
And people need to understand that. It's not a diss on AA, but AA is not the only way to get sober. So I don't want people to go into an AA room and say, hey, this isn't for me, so that means recovery is not for me.
Correct.
There's so many different ways to do that. I began to kind of step away from some of the traditions as far as like the chips and the way you have to start time over if you relapse, because I would suffice to say a majority, it could be 51%. So I'm going to say a majority of people within recovery have had relapse or they've been to treatment multiple times.
Yeah.
So here's my thought on it. And I'll give you 2 analogies and our listeners 2 analogies. So I ran the marathon, New York City Marathon in 2017.
Okay.
I trained my ass off for that damn race. And I get to New York in November and I'm racing. And I am an athlete, so I gave myself a time that I had to hit. All right. I'm like, you have to finish the race in 3 hours and 15 minutes. It's about a 7:15 mile pace. So it's running. So I get to mile marker number 17. Now, our bodies are not built naturally to run 26 miles in that fast a time.
Right.
They're just not built that way. So your body starts to break down at some point during the race. Every race runner, no matter if you win the marathon, your body's breaking down. My body started to break down at mile marker number 17. And I fell to the ground. And my leg was cramping up. And I went to I pulled off to the side of the road where the race was, and I just started crying. And crying in pain, crying because I failed, crying because I wasn't going to make my qualifying time. I was doing so well. And it was such a life moment. This race official, this woman comes up to me and she goes, first off, are you okay? Like, where do you hurt? And I said, I'm cramping. It's cramping, my hamstring. I'm cramping. I'm screaming. I'm crying. She goes, calm down. She goes, hold on. She goes, here's what we're going to do. She goes, I'm going to signal over to another race official. We're going to get electrolytes in you. And she goes, I'm going to massage your leg. Okay. And I was crying. She goes, why are you so upset? And I said, I'm not going to make my qualifying time. Like I'm not going to hit the record that I was trying to hit. She looked at me and she goes, what's your name? And I said, Brandon. She goes, Brandon, are you trying to win the New York City Marathon? She goes, because if you are, I just want to let you know they crossed the finish line about an hour ago. She goes, hold on. She gets me electrolytes. She's massaging my legs. And she goes, you know what you're going to do? You're going to walk the rest of the way to the finish line. And if you can jog, but you're going to get up and you're going to walk and you're going to cross that finish line. I crossed that finish line at 3 hours and 27 minutes. I did not hit the record that I wanted to. But you know what that life... Did that race official look at me and say, hey, Brandon, you got to go back to Staten Island on mile marker number 1 and start this race over?
Right. Nope.
No. We're going to fix the issue.
Right.
Where are you hurting?
Yep.
We're going to fix it. Dust yourself off, damn it. Get back on the racetrack and go.
And you cross the finish line.
Because recovery is a marathon. It is not a sprint. There will be people who progress faster than you, people who hit that finish line, end of life finish line,
Correct. Yep.
faster than you. There are going to be people who do things, train different ways.
Right.
But you just run that race. And so that was one life lesson. The second one was this. You're in your master's program. Life gets really complicated in year 3. You're juggling kids, you're juggling a job, a full-time job, and you hit a really tough class and you don't pass that class. Does the dean of students come to you, Jeremy, and say you got to go back to year 1, class 1?
Correct.
No.
Yep.
You retake the class and you get your degree and you continue on with life.
Yep.
So why then in recovery, if somebody had 8, 9, 10, 12 years and they relapse, do we then make them come to the room, stand in front of a group of strangers
and say
in
that you're a
shame,
newcomer?
and say, give me all your chips.
Yep.
Here's your white one, buddy. 24 hours, start over. Because that addict, when we tell them to start over, goes back to where they were at their rock bottom.
Correct.
That's not where they're at today.
Not at all.
They don't lose all of the education, all of the skills that they have learned.
Correct.
They take that and they carry it on. So we are keeping so many people out there rooted in shame instead of coming back and say, that's why people who relapse come to me. I'm like, I don't give 2 shits. You relapse, congratulations. Do you want a better life? You do. Great. Hop back on the sober train and let's continue this journey.
Let's continue. Yep. Let's continue to roll. Yeah, no, and I agree, and that's not, those are 2 very good analogies, and it's so true, right? You don't lose all the things that you've learned and done and created. And many a times, if the relapse is short, I mean, you'll get to where you were at or even more in a much shorter duration. So it's not going to take you 12 years that it took you to get to where you were at 12 years before you relapsed. It's not going to take you 12 years to get back there.
Right.
It might take you a couple months. It might take you 6 months. So yeah, I mean, it's very true, and I myself too. I mean, I did a lot of AA. So I mean, so part of the, I went back and my, parents were in recovery as well. So similar story. So as I got out of treatment, I used to, manipulate, negotiate, whatever you want to call it, with my father and say, hey, give me a pack of cigarettes. I'll go to an AA meeting with you. Yeah. So I started in the rooms very early. 12, 13 years old again. And I did it several times, and I, for a long time, thought that was the only means to get sober, right? So when that didn't work, not to say that was the reason, but, some of the thought process and considerations were, AA is not for me, it's not working, so, what do we do from here, right? And so that's why I think it's so important, and I think I've touched on it, and you certainly touched on it. There is a different system, process, life map, whatever you want to call it, that works, and everybody's different.
Everybody's different.
Everybody's different.
Yes.
Now, the good thing about AA is I think a lot of the times, especially if you're newer into recovery, you need that environmental change and that social circle change, right? Yeah. A lot of the times AA can give that to you, right? So you don't want to isolate. That's the worst thing you can do, right? So you need to go out, socialize, interact, do those types of things. And if you've been using for a long time, you probably don't have anybody positive to do that with, except for maybe your family, but you have to branch out. And, so AA, I think in that regard does provide that type of structure, right? I mean, for me, it was a myriad of things. Again, I think it was a combination of, all the treatment centers and, all the AA meetings and, all the therapy and all the, getting honest and looking at trauma and looking at some of those things and kind of working through them. And today, it looks very different. I'm very connected in many different ways. The various things I do to stay sober, the routines that I stick with, the process of meditation and fitness and gym and just the things that work, the things that kind of keep me on track. So there's many different things, but I think the point to all of that is if AA doesn't work, there are other options.
Yes.
None of it's cookie cutter.
That's just what I want people, because
yeah.
I do get that all the time. I mean, I suggest people go to a meeting, go check it out, and then they'll come back to me and they're like, yeah, that wasn't for me. And then they give up. And I'm like, God, no, don't do that. Don't do that at all.
Yeah.
So you work at Community Bridges, CBI. Here's what I love about CBI, because I do get hit up by a lot of families. Just because of my job. And I'll get direct messages and they're like, hey, listen, like my child needs this, but we don't have good insurance, or we don't have insurance. And that means there's no treatment for me. It's one of the reasons why I partnered up with CBI, because I so believe in their mission, because they won't turn anyone away.
Yeah.
They will figure out a way. And I think that's beautiful, because not everyone is blessed or privileged enough to have insurance.
Right.
And they still, to me, deserve every chance at a life.
Correct.
At a sober life. What's it been like for you over at CBI? And what would you say is one of the great things that CBI has to offer, especially right now?
Yeah. And you bring up a good point, Brandon, and just a little history on CBI, right? I mean, the agency was really built by the community for the community, right? It started back in 1982 in the back room of Alcoholics Anonymous, a group of concerned community members and individuals in recovery identifying a shortage to access to treatment. And at that time in the East Valley, there weren't really many options, back in the early 80s. And so this group of concerned citizens and recovering alcoholics and drug addicts decided that, hey, there is a detox facility or treatment facility in Central Phoenix. How about we get a van and we'll start picking these guys up and we'll take them down to detox? And then, shortly thereafter, they realized, it's probably not the best thing to just start picking up these people. We're not really trained medically. There's no, and you have these people who are either super intoxicated or potentially going through DTs, withdrawals that could be, come with seizures and all these different types of things. So they decided, we're going to band together and figure out if we can't open up something in the East Valley. And that's when it started. I think it was EVAC, East Valley Addiction Council, East Valley Addiction. EVAC is what it was called, was the original name. And that building still exists today. It's we now call it EVARC, East Valley Addiction Recovery Center. And it's a, crisis and inpatient facility in the East Valley. That type of mentality and mission has never changed for the agency, right? CBI has been an agency that has always taken what the community needs, what's the issue, where's their need, and we'll figure it out. Right. A lot of the times, it may not even be something that we're very familiar with, or maybe something that we haven't done, but the community needs it, right? Yeah. So what is it that we can do to band together, further the mission, put together the resources, and let's give it a shot. Let's try something. Let's see if it works. If it doesn't work, we won't do it, or we'll shift something around. And that is how CBI has went from a much smaller agency to really now a larger system. I mean, I don't think a lot of people realize the comprehensive nature of Community Bridges today.
It's massive.
Massive.
I mean, I would even suffice to say I would challenge any other treatment center in America to put it up against how massive and expanding it is.
Yeah, and they definitely are. I mean, Business Journal has rated us, I don't know about last year, so I don't want to misspeak, but there have been a number of years in the last 5 years that we have been the largest, medically integrated nonprofit behavioral health agency. And I want folks to realize that it really is the full continuum. I mean, we have integrated outpatient clinics, we have crisis facilities, and crisis facilities is a big part of the agency and a big part of that no wrong door philosophy, right? It's kind of that point of entry per se. And so in Arizona in general, I think is just very fortunate to have it, because a lot of states, to me, Arizona is much more innovative as far as kind of how our behavioral health system is set up and access to services. I won't start going down the tangent, but primarily due to a big lawsuit, Arnold versus Sarnes, that kind of started at the end of the 80s when they started shutting down a lot of the state hospitals and various resources for individuals to receive treatment, and then the jails kind of became the de facto treatment places, right? But it's not a treatment place, so there were a lot of things that happened, and so it was kind of this big class action lawsuit that went on for a long time due to inadequate access to healthcare or mental health. And so, so the crisis facilities, I mean, really the point of entry, right? There's other, companies that run crisis facilities, but, Community Bridges has a majority of them. 3 here in Maricopa County. You have 1 in West Valley, Central Phoenix, and East Valley. And it really is that point of entry, right? So really the idea behind that is that no wrong door philosophy, right? treat folks with dignity and respect, right? And always treat them like it's their first admission, understanding the cycle of addiction and the way that things kind of happen, right? So, what is it that we can do to be there, to be non-judgmental, to be supportive, to work with our continuum and the comprehensiveness of our system, to figure out what is it that we can provide the individual that walks through that door to maybe help them to where they need to get to, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, it's a marathon, right?
Right.
It's not a sprint. So we're not looking for complete abstinence. We're not, obviously abstinence, in my opinion, is the best, right? And my personal story is that I tried a lot of the various things such as, Suboxone or buprenorphine and some of these, medication-assisted treatment. That wasn't the solution for me, right? However, if I wasn't doing that at that point in time in life, would I still be here today?
Right.
That's the big what if, right? Because the way that I was going, using medication-assisted treatment or doing some of these things slowed me down, right? Compared to where I was going prior to. So could it have very well saved my life? Yeah. Was it the answer to, long-term abstinent recovery? No, right? But Community Bridges is real big on harm reduction and really trying to, meet individuals where they're at. To start doing the marathon, right?
Yeah.
If that means that we have to walk a little bit because our hamstring is pulled, then that's what we'll do. If we're able to start jogging, well, let's start jogging. And if we're able to sprint, let's sprint.
Yeah.
Right. But let's get through that finish line. And so that is what has really been close to me. And something that has always appealed to me about the agency, and something that I think is so important. And it's not only for the uninsured and underinsured. Obviously we're contracted with all the major commercial, health plans. But there is that option for anyone.
Yeah.
And
that's the thing. I want people to know there's always an option no matter your circumstance.
Yeah.
As we wrap it up, I always ask as a closing thing, because this is my life's purpose, is how do we end the stigma around mental health? I have my own personal beliefs about that. But I love to ask everyone in the healthcare profession, how do we end the stigma about mental health and specifically addiction?
Yeah. Great question. And it's something that's going to continue to take a long time, right? I think over the years we have made a lot of progression. And to me, it's really about advocacy and really sharing stories and painting the different picture. Because the face of addiction has changed.
Yeah.
It does not discriminate. Professionals, educated, physicians, non-physicians, attorneys. It does not matter. They're it affects and impacts everybody. So, by advocating as much as we can, any family member, anybody in recovery, anybody in the industry, anywhere, any place that you have the opportunity to do something to make a change, to maybe change somebody's perception, right? Again, going back to that third grade scenario, right? This isn't something that they wanted to grow up to be, right? So it is a disease,
right.
And the way that it works. And by reducing the stigma, we're only saving lives, right? Because so many individuals don't want to come forward or don't want to say anything because of the stigma that's associated, right? And especially individuals who, professionals and various things like that. It's like, well, I don't want to come forward because that's going to hinder my career, or people are going to look at me differently because of the stigma. But really, you got to break that down. We are all people, right? And my experience has been that people in recovery that have gone through those things to kind of have some of this humility and self-realization of life. These are some of the best people out there, right? And I mean that from a moral, ethical, helpful, selfless standpoint, right? Just genuine, amazing human beings. So I just think, I don't know that there's necessarily the right answer. I've put a lot of thought into it because ultimately that's why I got into the field, was to reduce the stigma. Right. And so I think it's going to be time. And the more that people who have big followings, who have, people that look up to them as much
large platforms.
Yeah. Large platforms.
I put a ton of thought into this, and here's my belief. And this is where a lot of the people within, the AA rooms really come at me pretty hard, some of the old timers. To me, it's removing the anonymity. right? The reason why anonymity exists, in my opinion, all right, there's even multiple takes on this. The reason why I believe anonymity exists, it's rooted in shame, right? Because societal shame, because the reason why we're keeping somebody anonymous is because they don't want to lose their job. They don't want their boss to know that they're an addict and an alcoholic. We want to get them help. But that's rooted because the stigma against mental health is there. Right? The reason why that employee can't go to employer or fear out of losing the job is because they fear that their boss will look at them as weak, as somebody who's incompetent, as somebody who's not strong enough. So here's my belief. If every addict in the world, anybody who's a recovered addict right now, today, went on social media and said, I am so-and-so and I'm an alcoholic, or I'm a recovered addict, I'm a recovered alcoholic, right? If everybody in the rooms or everybody in recovery did that today, we will see people are lawyers, doctors, pharmacists, news anchors, attorneys, top attorneys, CEOs, people in leadership roles.
Correct.
We will all of a sudden see that. And then what will that do? Society will be like, oh, damn, that's my boss, the CEO who's super successful. You mean he struggled with booze and alcohol? Oh, damn. Hey, guess what? I'm struggling too. Right? That immediately, if we remove the anonymity, I believe that's how we remove the stigma. Because the stigma only exists there because the people who do speak out, or a lot of them, it's your homeless people, right? It's your people who are at the bottom, where they feel they have nothing to lose. And the society goes, oh, you're that person. That's not true.
Right.
And that's why I have friends who are extremely successful, who have never gone public. And they're still in anonymity. And they're like, yeah, but Brandon, those are the traditions of AA. And I'm like, damn it. I'm like, do you know how many people you can help? If you just come out publicly and say, hey, I'm a recovered addict of this many years, this is what my life looked like, but look at my life today. You can have this too.
Right.
It is the reason why I truly believe I've been given this platform, that God has, my higher power has given me special gifts to be a communicator so that I can have the job that I have and the platform that I do, so that I can put a face to addiction and say, hey, yeah, the guy you trust every night on the CBS 5, 630 news. I was that meth addict on the streets, overdosed on life support. That used to be me. Look at my life today. Judge me by today, but that used to be me. And you can have what I have today. And that's how I believe we begin to end the stigma around mental health. We got to change the stereotype. We only do that with real people, real voices coming out and saying that used to be me. So let's just get rid of the anonymity part.
And then we'll be good to go.
Can we just get rid of the anonymity part? So sorry if you are part of AA and I've offended you, but go talk to your sponsor. I like to say, old timers come at me pretty hard sometimes. I'm like, yeah, you got something. When are you meeting with your sponsor next? Good, you got something to talk about. Jeremy with Community Bridges, thank you, man.
You bet.
I appreciate
Thanks
you
so much
coming
for
on,
having
sharing
me.
your insight, sharing your story.
Absolutely.
If you want more information about Community Bridges, we're going to provide it right now.
This podcast is sponsored by Community Bridges Incorporated. CBI is a premier nonprofit, fully integrated healthcare provider of substance abuse and behavioral health programs right here in Arizona. They offer prevention, education, and treatment services using cutting-edge, nationally recognized, evidence-based models. CBI believes in maintaining the dignity of human life and knows recovery is possible. The staff of over 1,600 employees celebrate, believe, and inspire others daily, as over 75% of the team members are in recovery themselves. Contact CBI at scheduling@cbridges.com or visit their website, communitybridgesaz.org.